So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint this door. And this was one of the things that attracted me to this picture in the first place, was the contrast in terms of colors between the brickwork and the door. And so I'm interested in some sort of turquoisey, bluey color there. But I would also like to try and have the feel of the patina of this. There's lots of wood, brown wood showing through and so forth. So we'll deal with that in just a moment. And then whilst that is drying, I'm going to, as soon as I've done that, I will then explain what I'm going to do about getting the effects of the crumbling brickwork and everything going on this. So my colors for this one, oh, there was a color that I forgot to mention I'm using, and that is lemon yellow. So I've got lemon yellow here, and let's just, and I want a sort of bluey turquoisey color. Now this color I'm using here is called manganese blue, but if you've got cerulean blue, some sort of light blue, you could even use cobalt if you wanted to, but I'm going to add some lemon yellow to it. That's gone a bit too green for me, so I think what happens if I put some ultramarine blue in? I've got some sort of color there. It can be really quite light. I've loaded up my brush with it, and I'm going to paint the doorway. Just a little thing. This, let me get the photograph again. This little bit of brickwork that sticks into the doorway here and here, I'm just going to try and keep that if I can, and take the color down to here, and then bring in some sort of browns here to suggest the age in the door. So I've picked up a color here. I'm going to pop that in like that, happy to leave gaps like so. And then I'll go to my burnt umber or raw umber or something like that, and using the edge of my brush, I'm just going to drop some of that in here, which is in effect the wood showing through. Let's just put some here. Picking up water, just a little bit. I'll add a bit of a burnt sienna there.
David, can you pass my phone?
And I'm using
please, my phone.
This bit of the brickwork, which I said, can we try and leave that light? I'm doing that there. Let's see. I don't want to make any more fuss of it. Maybe, because I may well come back to that. So I've just established something of the color, and I'm allowing the browns to just work their way into the paint, and just paint it like that. Now I'll come back to that in a moment and mention it again, but the main thing that I want to do in this step, and this will be another session where I'll start painting things, and then I'll let you paint and I'll paint along with you. What I want to do here, let me get this photograph out, is, I don't know how, I'll call this accents. I want to put in some of these very dark accents. Now, normally in a watercolor, you work from light to dark, but in fact, the more you paint, the more you realize you just muddle that up as you wish. But I'm going to put in the dark areas. And I'm going to create, if you like, establish more to do with the brickwork than we already have. So cracks, gaps. I suppose really this is, I'm mostly painting gaps in here. I will be putting a lighter shadow color over the whole thing later, and some of that will go into some of these gaps. But what I'm mixing here is a dark color. So let's talk about mixing these colors. You can do this with a range of different colors. An obvious one is something like French ultramarine blue, which I've got there, and say burnt sienna. Now that should give you a good dark sludgy color. That's not dark enough. So if I want to make it darker still, I'll add a little bit of the neutral tint or a little bit of Payne's gray. Let's see what I've got there. And I want this paint to be quite dry. It doesn't want to be too wet. Okay, let's see how that goes. I'm going to mix up a little quantity of that. Go back to my French ultramarine blue. Put a bit of this is where, if you're using decent quality paints, it helps. If you're working with cheaper paints, you're going to have to sort of bust the gut to try and get these colors going well for you. I'll put a bit of burnt umber or raw sienna or something in there. And a little bit of this neutral. Let's have a look and see how, and that wants to be quite a strong, thick color. I can make that even stronger at the moment. I can always add water to it. So a bit more of that neutral or Payne's gray, a little bit more blue. That's pretty good. That's pretty strong. Now this is going to seem quite harsh at first, but it will work out when we come and do all the shadows. So here I'm going to start to paint the cracks, if you like, but I really don't want to paint every single crack. I just want to make some marks which will give me the edge. If you look closely at the photograph, and for your photograph or this photograph, the light is coming down this way, and we have shadows underneath this frieze thing. We have shadows on the door. We have shadows underneath bricks and shadows in here. What you have a lot is some accents in the gaps underneath whatever's protruding out. So I'm just trying to keep in mind what it is. So let me begin and start to, and here you are making it up even a little bit more than you did before. And don't worry if it hasn't quite worked the way you want it. Remember, I'm not going to get too fussed about what's going on in the outside here. I think the more you get involved in this, the more you'll start to really just make marks. Now, this is a great brush for doing this because it's pretty uncontrollable. And what I don't want to do is I think if you something like a flat brush or something might be a little bit too architectural and rigid here. So I'm just looking at where my bricks might be and putting in where the really dark bits are. Now,
can I just interrupt you? Annie Wild wants to know what the dark mix is, please. Again,
is ultramarine blue is the way I've mixed mine. Ultramarine blue, French ultramarine blue, and then I've put burnt sienna or a burnt umber in it. And if I wanted that to go a bit darker still, I've added Payne's gray or neutral tint. Just had a look at it, and that's pretty dark. these are going to be the accents. So let me just do a couple of other little things here. Let's start to develop some cracks. You can make up the cracks as you like here. Okay. I'm trying not to be too specific about this. Lots of little cracks here. And then just have fun destroying the wall that you built. Much better off just putting little marks in. You can always come back and do some more later on. That might even be too much that I've put in there. So let's not get too excited. And where you know that things are, you know, for instance, we've got quite a lot of gaps there, which we could play with. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work around. Now, where I've coming to the plaster work that's still there, I'm just going to indicate one or two little bits marks. Now, remember the shadow is mostly at the top of something that's broken. Okay, that's the nature of the light coming down on it. And so when I come to edges of plaster work, and the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll just go over this all again, is that this frieze up here that we've got, you can do this whichever way you like. I'm happy to paint it, but it's a half an arc. And what I'm going to do is, if I can suggest, I'll just draw with a pencil these sort of shapes, which are the light in it. Going around like this. You can do it that way and pop in a little bit of darkness, not all the way around, just little bits of it around. Or you can just do it by painting it like this, just so you. It's only an indication. It will actually come into its own when we put the overall shadows in later on. Okay, so I'm just putting something in there, which I hopefully you can see. I've tried to just leave it so that the light bits, the bits that are catching the light, are showing. Let's take it down to here. You can get as fine with this as you like, but I'm just trying to indicate, and I think that's going to be enough for me there. And just something like that. Let's put a big hole in my wall there. Why don't we stick something in there? Right. So what I'm suggesting now, let me just run through what we've done, is that you go ahead and paint. So I started off with the doorway. I've put in a light turquoisey bluey color. We can change this later on if you want to, but it's something contrasts with all the reds that are going around. And whilst it was all still wet, I've dropped in some browns just to suggest the door, which is a fairly worn door here. Let that go. Then mixed up this dark color, which I used French ultramarine, one of the browns, sienna or burnt umber, and then made it even darker with a little bit of Payne's grey if you want to, and then made these accents, which I'm going to go around and carry on with in a moment, and then finished off by putting just some sort of indication of that frieze around there. if in doubt, don't do more than you feel you want to, because you can always come back in the painting, as you'll see later on, and just add more if you want to do so. But I want to put in enough here to give a feel for a crumbling wall. Okay, everyone?